And good morning, UTRGV, and welcome to All In with Ali, live from our Edinburgh studio here. It is 88 degrees and sunny, and it's been nice over the last week. Apologies for missing last week due to some technical issues we've had here, but we're back. We're excited. We're ready to run it back. And first big topic of the week is UTRGV football. They held their first practice this week, Monday, at the Richard Florida Stadium in Edinburgh. And it was a huge turnout. It was great seeing so many people come out and support a program that hasn't played a game. This is just the first practice, and we're already seeing this sort of level of support. So I was there at the practice. Some quick observations. A lot of speed on offense is a very very quick. A lot of playmakers there, and the defense had some takeaways too. So it was just, your typical football practice. They ran some 7-on-7 and 11-on-11 drills. And the roster for the football team consists mostly of freshmen, but there's a few second-year transfers in the roster, such as Ian Box and Xavier Nolan, who played at this level before, who know what it's like, who can bring some experience and some veteran presence to that locker room. And so And so that veteran presence is going to be key as the program starts to gain its legs. For more on that football program, we can just tune to the Writer on Monday, utrgvwriter.com, or pick up a newspaper anywhere on campus. There will be an article written about it. Speaking of college football, let's talk Texas versus Michigan. Texas absolutely beating the brakes out of the Wolverines, who aren't looking the same without Harbaugh at the helm. It's last year the Wolverines winning the national title, and despite what they had dealt with regarding the scandal and the sign stealing, and that's probably a good reason why Harbaugh decided to leave, because he knew that the hammer was likely going to come down on him, and he's doing pretty well at the NFL level, winning his first matchup of the week. Another college football match I'd like to talk to is NIU upsetting Notre Dame on the road, which that's the first time that in a while that NIU had upset a ranked team on the road. And to my understanding, I never understood the hype around Notre Dame. They've been ranked so high for almost no reason whatsoever. It's Every year the AP polls, almost every year, the AP poll seems to think, oh, Notre Dame's finally going to make the playoffs, Notre Dame this and Notre Dame that, and then usually by the first couple weeks of the college football season, the mask falls off, and mask falls off on Notre Dame, and they're not anywhere near the preseason hype that we expected from them. So in a sense, they are the Dallas Cowboys of college football. A lot of expectation, but going nowhere. Speaking of the Dallas Cowboys, we will be talking NFL in the next few segments. We'll also be talking baseball right after this break. This from Vaquero Radio. Welcome back to All In with Ali. Let's talk some Major League Baseball in this segment. First, I'd like to talk about the American League East right now. It's a very tight race, as I mentioned in the last iteration of our show. Right now, it seems like nobody wants to win that division. I believe at this moment the Yankees are leading the Orioles by a game or a half a game. It's very close, and those are two teams that could potentially make a run or make some noise this postseason. The Yankees have sort of been in a bit of pedestrian form. Aaron Judge hasn't. We haven't seen the type of production we've seen from Aaron Judge over the last year. So if the Yankees want to get anywhere, they have to get Aaron Judge going again. And the Orioles, they've been doing their part, keeping up with the New York Yankees after the hot start that they've had. The Orioles have done a pretty good job, especially considering the amount of injuries they've had to their pitching staff this year. And Corbin Burns brought in to shore up a rotation. He's been a great addition for Baltimore. And I think that Baltimore's got a very young and exciting lineup. I think that certainly have the potential to make some noise in the postseason. And continuing on in the American League, the Astros have also been in a bit of a pedestrian form, having lost 6 of their last 8, and the division lead is 3.5 games over Seattle, who won last night after the Astros lost yesterday. Some concerns, obviously, with Jose Altuve leaving the game early last night. Thankfully he was. It wasn't a long-term injury. Right now, I believe the Astros listed him as day-to-day. So this is a huge sigh of relief for Astros fans such as myself that Altuve could possibly see a return within this month, especially considering all the injuries the Astros have dealt with all year. I mean, right now is the time not to be messing around. If you're Houston, you have to not lose these games that there are not many left. There are not many games left in the regular season. I believe 16 games left, and with a 3.5 lead, which is almost nothing, that lead could disappear like that if you're caught asleep at the wheel. And with the Mariners, they're not out of it just yet. They put together something over the last week. So if you're the Houston Astros right now, if you're Joe Espada, or if you're Yordan Alvarez or Jose Altuve or Alex Bregman or any of the veteran leaders in that clubhouse, you have to sort of step up and say, right now we got to put our foot down. We got to get focused because you fall asleep at the wheel and all of a sudden there it goes. Because the Astros do have a lot of expectations. Despite their bad start, they played good baseball and they need to get back to that. They really do need to get back to that. Because the chances still, because the hype surrounding this team is that it's always World Series or bust. Make the ALCS every year like they have over the last 7 years. And if the Astros are caught asleep at the wheel, then it could be bad news for them. And the Astros, obviously, they want to make the ALCS. They want to win the World Series, especially knowing that they've been able to turn around such a poor result in the first month of the year to come back and be top of the division once again. So I think the Astros should be fine, but I'm cautiously optimistic about their chances to win the division. But emphasis on cautiously because of their form over the last week or so. But I believe this team, if any team can turn it around, it's this team. Like we've seen all year, there's no panic in that clubhouse, and we're hoping to see, especially if you're an Astros fan, to see a turnaround, to see a quick turnaround, and to see the Astros go back to the way they were. Now on to the National League. LA Dodgers got back a huge piece of their rotation. Yoshinobu Yamamoto returned the other night. He was on a pitch limit, so only got about 4 innings in, but in the very first inning, he struck out the side. Absolute nasty stuff from him. Dodgers paid him a lot of money to be the front man in this rotation, and even with him being out for an extended period of time, just to make an immediate impact would fare very well for LA's chances going forward, especially with the Diamondbacks and the Padres not far behind them. So the Dodgers are another team promising to make a huge run in October. We haven't seen a lot in the postseason from them. Last year with their upset in the division series, and the previous year with another loss in the division series. So the Dodgers want to at the very least get back to the NLCS. And another game that I want to talk about from yesterday, Blue Jays and Mets. The New York Mets coming back in the 9th inning, scoring 6 runs on the Blue Jays. First of all, shout out to Bowden Francis for the Blue Jays, who pitched an absolutely incredible game. Took a no-hitter into the 9th inning but then it was spoiled by a leadoff home run by Francisco Lindor. After that, the Blue Jays sort of fell apart, and as the Mets proceeded to drop 6 runs in the 9th inning and take the victory 6-2 over Toronto. Well, Toronto this year, there was a lot of promise from them, but unfortunately they have not looked good at all this year. It's been a very, very disappointing season from them. They have not looked good at all this year. It's been a very, very disappointing season from them. They have not looked good at all this year. It's been a very, very disappointing season from them. They have not looked good at all this year. It's been a very, very disappointing season from them. They have not looked good at all this year. It's been a very, very disappointing season from them. They have not looked good at all this year. It's been a very, very disappointing season from them. They have not looked good at all this year. It's been a very, very disappointing season from them. They have not looked good at all this year. It's been a very, very disappointing season from them. They have not looked good at all this year. It's been a very, very disappointing season from them. They have not looked good at all this year. It's been a very, very disappointing season from them. They have not looked good at all this year. It's been a very, very disappointing season from them. They have not looked good at all this year. It's been a very, very dis it's been bad game after bad game after bad game, and I'm sure there's a lot of conversations that will have to be had this offseason if you're in the front office of the Toronto Blue Jays of do we continue or do we sort of hit the mini reset button here, because they have the pieces to do it. It's just they haven't been consistent. They have an offense. They have the offense, which didn't turn out much yesterday, only putting out 2 runs. They have the pieces in the lineup, but their pitching staff has left a lot to be desired. Especially, that might be an indication of what they do this offseason, considering they already started to move some of their pieces, like Yusei Kikuchi. They moved him to the Houston Astros at the deadline. So we'll have to wait and see how they're doing there. But meanwhile, the NL East, or at the very least the playoff race in the National League, there's a lot of teams chasing down those last few spots in the NL playoff picture. And one of those is the New York Mets. They're trying to chase down the Braves at this moment. And it looks like the Phillies are going to end up running away with that division. But the second and third spots could determine who gets a spot in the postseason, and those will be key to look out for. Stick around for the next segment. We'll talk about the NFL. We'll talk a lot of football coming up. Now this from your local station. Welcome back to All In with Ali. Next segment, let's talk about the NFL and matchups I'm keeping an eye on next week. Obviously, as a Texans fan, I'm going to be watching the game. That's on Sunday night against the Bears. I think Texans will probably win that game handily, especially considering the performance put together by the Texans last week, which we'll elaborate a bit more on the next segment. But some matchups to keep an eye on. First off, actually this one's tonight, 7:15, Bills and Dolphins in the AFC East. I think that's going to be a great game, but first off, some concerns with the Dolphins running backs. Raheem Mostert is out, and Devon Achane is sort of day-to-day with an ankle injury, which if I'm Mike McDaniel, I'm probably going to rest him. I'm probably going to rest Achane so that he could recover, especially given that the short week that the Dolphins have right now. So preserve him for the rest of the schedule, which coincidentally is also why I'm going to bench him this week in my fantasy league. Because even if he starts, he's probably not going to get many carries just to preserve the ankle for the remainder of the year. But Bills-Dolphins promises to be a pretty good game. Both teams 1-0 right now. And usually it's always a pretty good matchup between Tua and Josh Allen whenever these two teams and these two quarterbacks duel off. So that's the first matchup to keep an eye on. Second, Bengals and Chiefs, Sunday 3:25 p.m. I think that's going to be in that time slot. I think that's going to be the game to watch, because Joe Burrow looking for a bounce back performance after last week. Usually, I'm not panicking on Joe Burrow, because usually Joe Burrow starts off the year pretty slow, but then once the year picks up and once he starts getting back into the swing of things, then that's when we see him shine as a quarterback. And he is one of only, and keep in mind, he's one of only 2 quarterbacks that has beaten Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. So that's him and Tom Brady. That's it. That's the list. And so it's always a good matchup between the Bengals and the Chiefs, especially Burrow and Mahomes dueling it out, and how great the Chiefs looked last week in their win. I think that'll be a very good matchup to keep an eye on. And then Bucs-Lions at noon on Sunday. That's going to be the next big matchup that I would like to keep an eye on. The Bucs look pretty good. Baker Mayfield looked fantastic in his last performance. So we'll elaborate a little bit more on Baker Mayfield. But the Lions also taking a win from the Los Angeles Rams on primetime last night on Sunday Night Football. I think this will be the game to watch in the noon slot on Sunday. So, with that in mind, we'll go back to PSA, and when we're back, we're going to talk the biggest losers and winners on the NFL last week. Stay tuned. We'll be back after these messages. Welcome back to All In with Ali. Let's talk NFL on this segment. Like I said, we're going to talk the biggest losers and the biggest winners of Week 1 of the NFL season. Starting with the losers. First one, I want to talk about the Carolina Panthers. Oh my God, did you see that against the Saints last week? That Bryce Young did not look good. That offensive line was a turnstile, and that defense was getting picked apart. It was a massacre. It looks like the Panthers are going to be gunning for the bottom of the league spot. They're going to be gunning for that number 1 pick once again because Bryce Young. This was supposed to be the year he takes a step in the right direction. He hasn't, and I know it's Week 1, and it might be too early to panic for certain players, but it's absolutely the right time to panic if you're the Carolina Panthers because they frankly did not look good last week, and they look like they're going to be the team that finishes in last place again. That trade with the Bears that they made to get the number 1 pick and select Bryce Young, it's looking like it's going to haunt Carolina time and time and time again. And as recently, you could scoop up a pair of Panthers tickets for $1.80. If that doesn't give you a picture of how bad the situation has gotten there, I don't know what is. And if you're a Panthers fan, then I don't know what else to say, man. Just hang in there, because because as a Texans fan, we were in the basement for a couple of years before we put everything together, and those years are always tough as a fan, but you got to go through the lows to experience the highs. Next, I want to talk about the Tennessee Titans. That whole game was some sloppy football against the Bears. And I want to talk about that pick that Will Levis threw that basically secured the game for Chicago. I did not understand what he was doing. He was down on a knee, couldn't find an open receiver downfield, and at that point, the decision would just be to go down, take the loss of yards. But Will Levis tried to throw it away, but he wasn't. I don't know what was going on. I guess he wasn't paying attention, but threw it straight into a Bears double coverage where there was no receiver in the area, and that got sent to the house for pick 6 that secured the win for Chicago. Caleb Williams didn't exactly look stellar in his debut either. He was overthrowing receivers, underthrowing receivers. It was a very tough first game for the rookie, but Levis has had some time under his belt to adjust, and if Tennessee wants to get anywhere, they have to tell Will Levis not to make risky throws like that. It wasn't the offense that won Chicago that game. It was their defense. And next week, it's not getting any better for the Bears as they face off against a very stout and tough Houston Texans defense. And next I want to talk about next biggest loser, the Cincinnati Bengals. Week 1, they simply did not look good. And like I said earlier, Joe Burrow starts off slow, but this one was a pretty bad one. Next I want to talk about Kirk Cousins, next biggest loser of Week 1. Kirk Cousins did not look good in his first start in an Atlanta Falcons uniform, and which I didn't understand why they would take Michael Penix at quarterback in the draft and then go on to sign Kirk Cousins. That's just a move that I did not understand, and frankly, I think that even if they wanted to have Penix sit behind Kirk Cousins, why did they pay Kirk Cousins so much money like he was a 17-game starter? And I'm sure Drake London fantasy managers have noticed he wasn't throwing to his top targets. He was relying more on his tight ends, and that really didn't pan out for Atlanta. Last and certainly least, for biggest losers of Week 1, Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson was... That trade they made is looking worse and worse every time that Deshaun Watson steps on the field or steps off of it. For starters, let's talk about that game against the Dallas Cowboys. Deshaun was throwing more passes to the Cowboys secondary than he was 5 yards past the line of scrimmage to his own receivers. He was overthrowing, underthrowing. He could not hit the broad side of a barn past 5 yards. And not only did the Browns lose that game, not only did Deshaun Watson drop an absolute stinker on live TV, more credible allegations came out against Deshaun Watson not even hours after that game ended. So if I'm the Browns, I'm having serious conversations in that front office of when to just cut your losses and just drop Deshaun Watson, because Deshaun Watson, starter's a disgusting human being, but he's been a terrible quarterback ever since he put on a Browns uniform. It's looking more and more like any chances we're seeing Deshaun Watson but going back to his Texans form, slim to none. And look at the Browns last year. They played so much better with old man Joe Flacco at quarterback than they did with Deshaun Watson under center. And moving on from the losers, we're talking about the biggest winners of Week 1, Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield had an excellent game for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Last year he broke out, took the Bucs to the playoffs and beat Jalen Hurts. And then this week he's picking up right where he left off, and we saw some incredible quarterbacking play, and Browns fans surely are missing Baker Mayfield right now, because Baker Mayfield finished with a passer rating higher than Deshaun Watson did. And remember, they traded away Baker Mayfield so they could get Deshaun Watson under quarterback. So in all ways, the Browns are feeling the effects of trading away Baker Mayfield and going after Deshaun Watson. Next, Chiefs and Ravens. Both teams this was an incredible game to start off the NFL season. First of all, I thought the Ravens got low-key hosed by a few of those calls of illegal formation. They weren't calling many of them against the Chiefs. But either way, it all came down to the wire to the very last drive, and Isaiah Likely, so close to tying the game in the fourth quarter, but his toe was out of bounds. And that's the rule. If your toe's out of bounds, then, what else can you do? If your toe's out of bounds, then you're out of bounds. That's just how the rule is. That's just sometimes how football goes. You just take it and move on. But the Ravens looked really good despite losing Week 1. I thought their running game was excellent. Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson dual threat at running. We saw a bit less from Derrick Henry. I think he's going to pick it up in the next matchup. But Lamar Jackson, you just can't. It's so hard to defend against a team that not only runs the ball with Derrick Henry really well, but also has a great rushing quarterback in Lamar Jackson. That is so hard to defend. And of course, the Kansas City Chiefs. What more can you say about them? They looked fantastic. Xavier Worthy looks like he's going to be a stud. Rashee Rice not picking up the suspension, playing in Week 1. I thought he did a pretty good job. And the Chiefs once again are looking like the team to beat in the AFC. Next winners from Week 1, Texans and Colts. Despite the Colts losing this game, they should come out of it feeling pretty good about Anthony Richardson. And I know what I said about Anthony Richardson the very first week, and I would like to apologize to Anthony Richardson. I wasn't familiar with your game, man. I'm sorry if you're hearing this, Anthony. I'm sorry. All right, that was what I thought about his arm was just it all went away with that 60-yard absolute missile that he threw to the end zone in that game. And it was a pretty good game. It was very close, down to the wire. It was just the kind of game that you would love talking about and watching after, but it's not the game that's fun watching live because it was just so stressful, coming down to the wire. And the Texans should feel great about this. C.J. Stroud on an off day still threw for over 200 yards. He was making incredible passes, including a risky throw across his body. Nico Collins just absolutely dominated at the wide receiver position this week. Made some incredible catches for key first downs. Stephon Diggs catching a couple of touchdowns. and Joe Mixon was absolutely running, and they could not stop him. He was incredible. The O-line was making blocks, and I can't remember the last time the Texans O-line was this good. They were making multiple lanes for Joe Mixon to just go out and do his thing, and it was incredible. Next biggest winner from week 1, Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott of the Dallas Cowboys. He not only coming out of week 1 with the win against the Browns, but hours before the game got signed to a huge 4-year extension, making him one of, if not the highest paid player in NFL history. So yeah, coming out with the win and coming out with a huge paycheck, I think Deshaun Watson's Deshaun Watson had a terrible week this week. I think Dak Prescott had an excellent week in week 1. He's celebrating the win and celebrating that nice big contract he got ahead of the game. And then, last but not least, for biggest winners of week 1, talk about the San Francisco 49ers. They, despite losing Christian McCaffrey to injury, I think they played an excellent game. I thought their backup running back, he was running all over the place. I think, once again, it looks like it's going to be Chiefs and 49ers who are the two teams to beat in their respective conferences. And that's about a wrap for football. Let's move on. Next stop, on this day in sports history. Today is September 12th, and on this day in 1913, the great Jesse Owens, multiple-time Olympic gold medalist, and if you haven't read up on his story, I absolutely encourage you to. It's an amazing story with Jesse Owens, and I believe if you haven't had the chance to read up on him, you absolutely should. Jesse Owens, born on this day in 1913 in Oakville, Alabama. 1976, Seahawks played their first game in the NFL after the conference merger, losing to St. Louis 30-24. And last but not least, 1979, Carl Yastrzemski, a legend for the Boston Red Sox, joined the 3,000 hit club. So that's it for this week, or this day, in sports history. Let's move on and talk some volleyball, specifically UTRGV volleyball. Home opener is tonight here at the UTRGV Fieldhouse, expecting a huge crowd. Huge crowd. Students can get tickets for their friends and family for $5, as announced by the Department of Intercollegiate Athletics. Friends and family of students for $5. Students get in for free. It's going to be, right now the Vaqueros are 4-2 to start their season. They're looking to go play in front of a home crowd against a Texas Tech team that's 5-1 on the year, but 0-1 on the road.
Who's going to be there? Who's going to be at the Fieldhouse?
You and me, Jan.
Yeah, of course.
And if you want more about volleyball and more about the Vaqueros team, be sure to tune in 6:15 tonight for volleyball against Texas Tech. It'll be me and Jan Trejo on the call for you, and we'll have more. We'll have more at that time talking about volleyball. Well, folks, as much as I would love to just go on and talk, I believe that's going to be it for this week. Be sure to tune into the game tonight, only on Vaquero Radio, the Valley student station. Thank you so much for listening this week. This has been your host, All In with Ollie, and we thank you for listening, and have a great one.